Okay, this one gonna be about Churchill. I guess you guys all know this person, and I was choosing this book, which is written by Andrew Roberts and got a title, Churchill Walking with like a Destiny. So the chapter one starts with the title a famous name, November 1873 and January 1895. It is said that famous men are usually the product of an unhappy childhood. The stern, like a compression of circumstances, like a twinks of adversity, the spur of slights and taunts in early years needed to evoke that ruthless fixity of purpose and tenacious mother wit, without which great actions seldom accomplish it. It seems like a quote by Churchill. So simply put it, you gotta have a fucked up childhood if you wanna success in life. And another quote goes like half English aristocrat and half American gambler. I don't know, it's related maybe to Churchill. But this quote from Harold Macmillan and on Churchill. Winston Leonard Spencer, Spencer Churchill was born in a small ground floor room, the nearest bedroom to the main entrance of Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire at 1:30 a.m. on Monday, 3rd of November 1874. And it was, warring birth. The baby was at least 6 weeks premature, and his mother, the beautiful American socialite Jenny Jerem, had suffered a fall a few days earlier. She had also been shaken by a pony cart the day before the birth, following which her labor pain started. In the event there were no abnormalities, and the baby's father, Lord Randolph Churchill, the younger son of the 7th Duke of Marlborough, was soon describing him as so-called wonderfully pretty, with dark eyes and hair and very healthy. The hair soon went strawberry blonde, and great tresses of it from when he was 5 can be seen in the birth room at the palace today. Thereafter, Churchill was red-headed. Interesting that he was experiencing different types of hair colors. The most useful information for now. So the name Winston recalled both Sir Winston Churchill, the child's ancestor, who had fought for King Charles I in the English Civil War, and Lord Randall's elder brother, who had died at aged 4. Leonard honored the baby's maternal grandfather, a risk-taking American financier and railway owner who had already made and lost 2 great fortunes on Wall Street. Spencer had been half-nated with the Churchill since 1817, the result of marital alliance with the rich Spencer family of Althorpe, Northamptonshire, who at that time held the earldom of Sunderland and were later to become the Earl Spencer. Proud of his Spencer's forebears, he signed himself like Winston Churchill, and in 1942 told an American trade unionist that, of course, his real name was Spencer Churchill. And it is, in this way that he's described, for example, in court circulars when he goes to see the king. The child's paternal grandfather was John Winston Spencer Churchill, owner of Blenheim Palace, which has been described both as the English Versailles and as the greatest war memorial ever built, named after the most glorious of the battles won by John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, in the War of Spanish Succession in 1704. And its magnificent structure, tapestries, busts, paintings, and furnishings commemorated a victory in a conflict that had saved Britain from domination by a European superpower. And in this case, the France of Louis XIV, a message that the young Winston did not fail to imbibe. We have nothing to equal this, King George III admitted when he visited Blenheim Palace in 1786. We shape our buildings, Winston Churchill was later to say, and afterwards our buildings shape us. Although he never lived at Blenheim, he was profoundly influenced by the splendor of the palace's 500-foot frontage. It's 7 acres of room, and it's 2,700 acres estate. He absorbed its magnificence during the many holidays and weekends he stayed there with his cousins. The palace was, still is, paraded with the spirit of the 1st Duke, the greatest soldier statesman in British history, who, as Churchill was to describe him in his biography of his ancestor, was a duke in days when dukes were dukes. For his late Victorian contemporaries, the young Winston Churchill's name conjured up two images: the splendor of the 1st Duke's military reputation, and the palace, of course, but also the adventurous career of Lord Randolph Churchill, the child's father. Lord Randolph had been elected a member of a parliament 9 months before Churchill was born, and one of the leaders of the conservative party from the a child's 6th birthday onwards. He was controversial, mercurial, opportunistic, politically ruthless, a brilliant speaker, both on public platforms and in the House of Commons, and was marked out as a future Prime Minister. as long as his inherent tendency to recklessness did not get the better of him. And in politics, he followed the precepts of the conservative leader Benjamin Disraeli, which combined imperialism abroad with a progressive program of social reform at home. Lord Randolph was to call his version Tory democracy, and it was to be embedded in full by Winston. His slogan was like "Trust the people." Was to be used many times in his son's career. Although Lord Randolph was like a son of a duke, he was not rich. At least relative to most of the rest of his class. And as an aristocratic younger son in the era of primogeniture, he could not expect to inherit much from his father. And although the father of his American wife Jenny Jerome had been enormously rich in the recent past, he was once nicknamed the king of the New York. He had seen massive reverses in the American stock market crash of 1873. Nevertheless, Leonard Jerome still lived in a house that covered an entire block on Madison Avenue and 26th Street, and which boasted extensive stabling and a full-size theater. He had owned the land where the Jerome Park Reservoir is today, founded the American Jockey Club, and co-owned the New York Times. By the time of Jenny's wedding, the year after the crash, however, Jerome could settle only £2,000 per annum on his beautiful daughter. The Duke of Marlborough contributing £1,200 per annum for his son, and along with a leasehold on a house at 48 Charles Street in Mayfair, courtesy of Jerome. That ought to have been enough for the couple to live upon comfortably. Had they not both been notorious spendthrifts, we were not rich, their son recalled during the Second World War. I suppose we had about £3,000 a year and spent £6,000. And Lord Randolph had met Jenny at Cowes Regatta on the Isle of Wight, Wight, in August 1873. And after only 3 days he had proposed and been accepted. They married in the British Embassy in Paris after a 7 months engagement on April 1874. And although the Marlboroughs have gave their formal a blessing to the union, they were absent from the wedding because the Duke, who had sent agents to New York and Washington to try to ascertain Jerome's genuine net worth, thought it is a mesalliance, and Jerome, a so-called vulgar kind of man, a bad character from the class of speculators. And then Churchill was proud that his parents had married for love, writing in 1937 about libel action he was launching against a book which had described him as the first fruit of the first famous snap dollar marriage. He told a friend, the reference to my mother and father's marriage not only very painful to me, but as you know, is utterly devoid of foundation. This was a love match, if ever there was one, with very little money on either side. In fact, they could only live in the very smallest way possible to people in London society. And if the marriage, became famous afterwards, it was because my mother, an unknown sprig of the aristocracy, became famous, and also because my mother, as all photographs attest, was by general consent one of the beauties of her time. Of course, who will call her mother fucking ugly? Okay, he eventually won to £500 in damages from the publisher for the libel, plus £250 in costs, but not the apology for which he had been hoping. Winston Churchill was born into a caste that held immense political and economic power in the largest empire in world history, and that had not yet become plagued by insecurity and self-doubt. Churchill's sublime self-confidence and self-reliance stemmed directly from the assurance he instinctively felt in who he was and where he came from. And his obituary of his cousin Sonny, the ninth Duke of Marlborough, he wrote that he had been born into one of the 300 or 400 families which had for 300 or 400 years guided the fortunes of the nation. He knew he came from the apex of the social pyramid, and one of the key attributes of that class at that time was not to care or much what people further down it thought of them. As his greatest friend, the Tory MP and barrister F.E. Smith, later Lord Birkenhead, was to write of him, and here's the quote: "He was shielded in his own mind from self-distrust." And this was to prove invaluable to Churchill at the periods of which there were many, and when no one else seemed to trust him. And the social life of the Victorian and Edwardian upper classes was partly based upon a staying in the country houses of friends and acquaintances for the a Friday to Monday extended weekend. Over the coming years, Churchill was to stay with Lydons at Knebworth, and his cousins, the Londoners at Mount Stewart, the Rothschilds at a train, the Grenfells at Taplow and Panshanger, the raspberries at Delmany, the Seckles, if I read this correctly, at Hatfield, the Duke of Westminster at Eton Hall, and on his yacht Flying Cloud, his cousins Lord and Lady Wimborne at Canford Manor, the John Astors at Hever, and the Waldorf Astors at Cliveden, as well as paying frequent visits to Blenheim and many other such houses. And although he occasionally experienced social ostracism as a result of his politics in later life, he always had an extensive and immensely grand social network upon which he could fall back. And this largely aristocratic cocoon of friendship and a kinship was to sustain him in the bad times to come. The Victorian English aristocracy was a distinct tribe with its own hierarchies, accents, clubs, schools, colleges, a career paths, vocabulary, honor codes, love virtues, loyalties, traditions, sports, and sense of humor. And some of these were quite intricate and almost impenetrable to outsiders. And as a young subaltern, Churchill was introduced to the caste system in India, he understood it instantly. His political opinions essentially stemmed from Disraeli's Young England movement in the 1840s, whose sense of noblesse oblige assumed eternal superiority, but also instinctively appreciated the duties of the privileged towards the less well-off. The interpretation Churchill gave to the obligation of aristocracy was that he and his class had a profound responsibility towards his country, which had the right to expect his lifelong service to it. And the British upper classes of the last quarter of the 19th century could on occasion seem quite separate from the rest of society, like Lord Hartington, heir to the dukedom of the Devonshire, had never heard of napkin rings, for example, because he assumed that the table linen was washed after every meal. The statesman Lord Curzon was reputed to have taken a bus only once in his life, when he was outraged that the driver refused to take him where he was ordered. So it's all people who never were spending time with the mediocre people. Similarly, the first time that Churchill dialed a telephone number himself was when he was 73. It was to the speaking clock, which he thanked politely, and he did not believe he depended on a household servants quite as much as he did. "I shall cook for myself," he once proudly told his wife in the 1950s. "I can boil, and I have seen it done." And in the end, he didn't. Aged 15, one of the like postscripts to his letters reads like Milbank is writing this for me as I'm having a bath. And 2 years later, he complained bitterly about having to travel in a second-class compartment, writing, "I won't travel second again by Jove." And when older, he rarely went like anywhere without a valet, even to the battlefields of the Boer War and Second World War. And while in prison in South Africa, he had a barber come in to shave him. He ordered food at the Savoy that was not on the menu, and as a prime minister, if he wanted a fly swatted, he asked his secretary to call for his valet to wring its a bloody neck. And Churchill, was so empathetically not a representative of the coming age of the common man, a true aristocrat. He was no snob. What is the sense of being against man simply because of his birth? He wanted to ask Adolf Hitler of the Jews, and his closest friend were taken from a wide social circle. Indeed, if anything, he had something of a weakness for a parvenus, such as his friends, Brendan, for example, Brendan Bracken and Maxine Elliot. Imbued with a historic sense of tradition, a close friend wrote he was quite untrammeled by convention. And this was seen in his eccentric dress sense, such as siren suits and zip shoes, as well as highly irregular hours he kept. And he enjoyed disregarding the rules of hierarchy, often to others' fury. So he was like a rebel. I am arrogant, he once said of himself in a perceptive piece of self-analysis, but not conceited. In the modern world, the sense of aristocratic entitlement is considered reprehensible, but Churchill was replete with it, and it affected his attitude towards everything. And it explains, for example, his readiness blithely to spend money that he did not have. In other words, he liked shopping, I guess. Yeah, he lived his life in aristocratic way, even if he could not afford it. But that was in itself aristocratic. He demanded extended credit, gambled heavily in casinos as soon as he was properly solvent, which was not until he was in his 70s, and he bought race horses. Many other memories that condemn Churchill for his insensitivity to other people in their views, but they fail to appreciate that just such rhinoceros hide was essential for someone who was to become as addicted to controversy as he was. And you're one of the few who have it in their power to bestow judgments which I respect, he wrote to Lord Craigavon, who had fought in the Boer War and was like a prime minister of like Northern Ireland. And in December 1938, at like one of the lowest points in his life, like the Marquis of Lansdowne, who promoted peace with Germany during the like First World War, or the Marquis of Tavistock, who much more reprehensibly did so during the Second. The aristocrat in Churchill encouraged him to say fully and exactly what he thought, regardless of the consequences. Churchill spent his early years in Dublin, where his parents lived at a little lodge close to the Viserigal Lodge in like a Phoenix Park, where Lord Randolph worked as like a private secretary to his father. The 7th Duke had been appointed Viceroy and like a Lord Lieutenant of Ireland by Disraeli in January 1877, and Lord Randolph had to leave like London because he was being socially ostracized by the Prince of Wales after trying unsuccessfully to blackmail him over like a scandal involving Randolph's elder brother, the Marquis of Blandford's some compromising love letters, married like a former mistress of the prince. It was one of the very many unedifying scrapes in which Lord Randolph found himself during his short, unstable, but undeniably exciting life. The Elephantin Prince had a long memory, and like Lord Randolph was not permitted to return to London for like over like 3 years. And Churchill's earliest memory was beautifully martial, of his grandfather like unveiling like a statue to Lord Gow, the Anglo-Irish imperial hero, in Phoenix Park in 1878. The Duke made a speech which like included the phrase, and with withering volley he shattered the enemy's line, which Churchill claimed he understood even at the age of 3, with like his grandfather representing like a Queen Victoria and like discharging her ceremonial duties in Ireland. And Churchill acquired like a profound reverence for like a monarchy that was to stay with him for the rest of his life. And his next memory came like the following March in like 1879, when he was riding a donkey in the park with a romantic scene, and came across what his governess feared was an Irish Republican demonstration, but which was probably in fact only marched by the Rifle Brigade. I was thrown off and had concussion of the brain, he later recalled. This was my first introduction to Irish politics.